Please, everyone, a warm, warm Google welcome for the voice of the Blue Jays, Jerry Howarth. This is a real treat for me. I fell asleep, as I mentioned over lunch, fell asleep listening to your voice for my entire childhood, as did my brother. I've listened to you all my life. It's an amazing, amazing moment. When I passed down to my kids who also enjoy listening to you, it's an amazing, amazing treat to have you here. So thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Eric. I appreciate that. I've put a lot of people to sleep on the radio. Actually, Alex, I want you to stand up for a minute. Yeah, there we go. How about a nice hand for Alex? Alex is the reason I'm here. We're two kids from the Bay Area. I grew up in the San Francisco Bay Area, went to Santa Clara University. And then a few years ago, I hear from this young lady, and she said, I'm from the Bay Area too. I went to the University of California, Berkeley. So she's a Golden Bear, and now is over here, and I'm happy to be here. Thanks for the invitation, and Eric and your kids, and visiting with Vera too, and Vern. It's very nice. So I'm happy to be here, and I think in a situation like this, let me just start off on a serious note, and then I want to answer any questions that you have. I'm 2.5 months removed from my prostate cancer surgery. It got a lot of attention in November. I went over to Sunnybrook Hospital. I've been there for a couple of years, and met a great friend who happened to be my surgeon, Dr. Rob Nam. And just before my surgery, he said, Jerry, it's Movember. Would you mind if, with the CTV News that they're going to do, a feature with me on MRI as opposed to a biopsy, would you mind being the guest with me? And I said, no, I'd be happy to do that. And so the only thing I say to all of you today, no matter what happens regarding baseball here today, make sure that your fathers, your uncles, your maybe young grandfathers know what their PSA readings are. And once they know what they are, 7 out of every 8, the reading will be 1 or 2, not a problem. But for that 1 out of 8, it might grow to 3 or 4, and that's what mine did. It went from 4 to 4.5. I was right here in Etobicoke. And then my doctor said, there's a reason why your numbers are going up. Let's send you over to Sunnybrook. Well, it went to 6, and then an intern came in and said, we'll see you in 6 months instead of a year. And then 6 months later, another intern came in, and it was at 6. But 6 months after that, when Dr. Nam himself came in, the antenna went up, and I thought, okay, the numbers are higher. And sure enough, they'd reached almost 9. Well, I'd had a biopsy in Etobicoke. It didn't show any cancer. And Dr. Nam was a big believer that an MRI eventually will be far more important, and a biopsy will become outdated. So he said, Jerry, let's do an MRI. So during the playoffs in October, I had an MRI. And he called me in. It was part of the TV interview we did with Pauline Chan. And he said, there it is. There was a little tumor growing right next to my prostate gland. He said, we have to go in there. You can do it with radiation, or you can do it with surgery. If you do it with radiation, you later cannot come back and do surgery. I said, let's do the surgery, and I'd like to have you do it. And he said, that'd be great. Well, they caught all my cancer at the stage 1 level. They took it all out November 22nd, and I go in about a week and a half just for a follow-up, but it all should be very good. Margins were clear and everything else. The only uncomfortable part was wearing a catheter for 2 weeks. So for you women, if your men get out of line, let me know, and I'll let you borrow it, and that'll take care of that. But I say that because when you go home tonight, you ask your dads, when was the last time you had a physical? Hopefully they're every year. What was your PSA number? And that was the beginning of a heightened awareness to make sure that my cancer, which I had no idea I even had any cancer in me, is caught at an early stage, okay? All right, so that takes care of that. I'm happy to be here. I've enjoyed 35 years with the Blue Jays. That's half my life. And I've coached 25 years of basketball. I just retired from being the senior boys coach in Etobicoke. It was a great run for me there, too. But when I get into a group like this, I start with the ladies. Alex, what's your first question here to get us started? This better be good because you're a Golden Bear.
A lot of pressure. My first question is, how do you, I just asked you when you, oh, I'm sorry. My first question, or the first question is, we just talked when you came in, and I said, are you excited for the season? And you're obviously very excited. So I want to know, I think a lot of people our generation may not think we'll have the same job for 35 years. And I want to know, what's the secret sauce? How do you keep it exciting? How do you sort of refresh when you're in the off season? What do you do to sort of keep your energy level as high as it is when you're calling these major plays?
That's a good question. And just the other day, I was at Centennial College talking to their journalism class, and that question came up. And even for all the kids that I coached in basketball, I would tell all my players, they'd sit in front of me, and I would say, if somebody would have told me in high school when I played sports that for half my life I would be a major league broadcaster, I would have said no way. But the answer is yes way, and there's two reasons. One, get as much education as you can. I think pretty much everybody in this room has done that. And number two, follow your heart. And then once you do that, and you're in a room where you're a Google employee, you're following your heart, that's pretty good. That gives you the enthusiasm every day to turn a hobby into a career. It's not really a work day, it's a play day. And that's always been the case for me too. I've enjoyed what I've done. Are there moments where you have to push yourself and get out of a comfort zone, or if somebody tells you you can't do this or you can't do that? Yes, those things happen. But once you get to a level where you are where you're supposed to be, and I think that's a philosophy of life, then enjoy that moment, and then the future will take care of itself. And I've always been blessed with that opportunity. Did I think that growing up in California that I would be in another country for half my life? No. And the funny story I tell people is when I was in Salt Lake City and the Mariners and the Blue Jays became a team, expansion teams, I interviewed for the Mariners job. I broadcast 2 years in Tacoma, Washington, right outside Seattle. It'd be like Hamilton here to Toronto. Lou Gorman was the general manager. I got an interview. I didn't get the job. And my wife said, well, you should apply to that other team. I said, what other team? And she said, the Toronto Blue Jays. She's from Michigan. I said, I don't even know where Toronto is. So I went down to my basement. I got a big atlas that we had. True story. I went to the back of the atlas, and I went QRST, okay, TORONTO. ON, I had no idea what the ON stood for. Page 195. So I went back to 195. It said D3. I go over D, down 3. There's Toronto. I looked, there's Salt Lake City. I said, I'm not going there. It's in another country. And she said, no, get your name out. Let's just get your name out. So I did, and 35 years later, here I am. So I think sometimes you just have to say to yourself, go where the flow is, and then if you're enjoying every moment, that's going to take you where you want to go. So that was fortunate for me. What's your name?
Hi, I'm Sophie.
What is it?
Sophie?
Sophie, what's your question?
Oh gosh.
Okay, I can't answer that one.
Okay. Which season was your favorite Blue Jays season that you've been a part of?
That's a good question. It would be the last two. Even though in 92 and 3, the Blue Jays won the World Series, and I was happy to be a part of that, because of people like you, the last 2 years, I've never heard crowds in Toronto cheer for the Blue Jays from their hearts than I have the last 2 years. It's unbelievable. I used to, in 92 and 3, be kind of amazed, coming from the States, where the crowd with 2 outs and 2 strikes on a hitter in the 9th inning would get up and applaud. Okay, that would kind of surprise me. Come on, wait, we need to have a little bit more. And then when the Blue Jays acquired David Price 2 years ago, and in his first game, he went out to warm up and he got a standing ovation. And then in the first inning, a couple men reached and they were on their feet cheering. I went, whoa, look at this. So I'd say the last 2 years were the most enjoyable. And look how the players fed off that too. And somebody asked me here today, it might have been even Alex, what do you think about this coming season? I think it'll be a good season. Every season, every game for me is a fresh white canvas. You paint it to the best artistic ability you can, then you initial it in the lower right-hand corner. But I think this is another year of a window of maybe 3 years where the Blue Jays have enough pitching, enough veteran expertise, and even without Edwin, can continue to add and make this team a playoff contender. Will they make it? I don't know. Because sometimes you have to tip your cap to the other team. They're pretty good too. But I think this year there's still another possibility of getting to the World Series, and they've come close the last 2 years, and I think there's enough holdover here to make it happen. I also like the people who were the architects in Cleveland, Mark Shapiro and Ross Atkins, who got them to within 2 runs of winning the World Series, and they did a fantastic job last year filling in for Alex Anthopoulos, who as a GM went to Los Angeles. And those two are going to make it happen here too because they know baseball, they're smart, they love Toronto, and I can't think of better successors to Alex than those two. Very good.
Thank you.
You're welcome. What's your name? Sorry, guys.
My name is Caroline.
Caroline.
It's very nice to meet you. My question would be, what is the most memorable moment of your career?
The most memorable moment in my career would be twofold. It would be Game 6 in Atlanta, the 1992 World Series. And Tom Cheek and I did the games together, and I did the 3rd and 4th and the 7th and 8th innings. Then we'd go down on the field. If it went extra innings, Tom did the 10th, and then we went every other inning. So in the 11th inning, the game was tied 2-2. That was the top of the inning for me. And Dave Winfield came up with 2 on and 2 outs, 3-2 changeup from Charlie Lee Brandt, yanked it over third for a 2-run double. I broke for a commercial. In the bottom of the inning, we came back, and I said, ladies and gentlemen, I've had the pleasure of calling Dave Winfield's 2-run double for the lead, and here's my partner, Tom Cheek, to take you the rest of the way. That was the right thing to do, and I've always felt that that's what you want to do. And then when the Blue Jays won it in the bottom of the inning, and Tom got to say the Blue Jays win the World Series, a first in Canada, I was happier that he made the call as opposed to my making the call. And so that's my most memorable moment, not only the Dave Winfield call, but letting Tom do it. And here again, it was 11 and a half years ago that Tom got a brain tumor and passed away. So again, you look back in your life, you do the right thing, there are no regrets. That was a good question. Now right behind you, what's your name? Yes. Jessica.
Nice to meet you. Thank you.
All right, Jess, what do we got?
When you're not rooting for the Blue Jays, what's the next team that you're rooting for?
Well, there are 2 teams that I root for. Now, I love being the Blue Jays broadcaster. That's a lot of fun. But the 2 teams that I root for, the San Francisco 49ers. I grew up in San Francisco. I went to my first 49er game when I was 8 years old. That's my team. And then one of my 2 boys moved to Chicago in 2000 after he graduated from Purdue. And about 9 years ago, he went to a Chicago Blackhawks game where they were drawing 8,000 a game. They were in last place. And he ended up buying a couple tickets, front row, upper bowl, right over the goal. They shoot at first and third periods. And they said, there's 20 games left. Do you want these as season tickets? They were drawing 8,000 a game. He said, sure. He has seen 3 Stanley Cups. Wow. The Blackhawks have won 3 in the last 6 years. And because my son is over there, then I started to follow the Blackhawks. Taves, Kane, all the rest of them. And now when I see Mike Babcock here with Marner, with Matthews, I see in a few years the same thing. And after 1967, isn't it about time? So yes, those would be my 2 favorite teams. One thing I'm very blessed with is that, and I tell young broadcasters this too, when you're a play-by-play broadcaster, you be you. Don't copy anybody. I don't root for the Blue Jays. I'm very proud to be their announcer. I love what they do. And as I've gotten older, I root for the manager and the coaches because they're more in my area. But at the same time, while I want the Blue Jays to win, I'm not a homer. I love the game of baseball. I like to broadcast the game and highlight the other team too. There's a reason you win, the reason you lose. And that's just me. Now the next broadcaster might be off the charts rooting for his team as a home announcer. That's okay. But for me, I've been more middle of the line, enthusiastic for my team, but praiseworthy of the game and how it's played. And the best games for me are just where both teams exceedingly do well, and then one team wins by a run. And that's a good effort. Then you go and try to do it the next day. Yes.
Hello.
Hello.
My name is Marga.
Marga?
Yes. Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you.
Also a transplant from the West Coast.
Where?
Vancouver. So,
Vancouver.
but spent some time in San Francisco as well.
Okay.
So as a West Coaster, and admittedly, baseball is not as big in Vancouver as it is in Toronto. We don't have a team. What is your biggest advice for a new Blue Jays fan or a new fan to baseball? Like how to appreciate the game in all of its glory?
I think the best thing to do, first of all, is go to a game right away to start the season.
Check.
If you go to a game in April, and you sit there, first of all, you capture the emotion of the crowd that I just talked about. Second of all, you see the players Josh Donaldson, Troy Tulowitzki, you have a mental image of who they are. And then whether the game is won or lost, it doesn't matter. You walk away, now you have an image of the team you're starting to root for. Then after that, watch them on television. Buck Martinez, Pat Tabler do a great job. Listen to them in your car radio with Jerry and Joe Siddle, who's a great partner. And then that way, you begin to kind of get a sense of the team that you're following. Then in May, go to another game. And then in June, go to 2 or 3 games. And that's how I think the best way to get introduced to a team if you haven't really followed the Blue Jays before. But I think the best thing, like anything, a Raptors fan, Leafs fan, try to go to a game right away so you can see it in your mind's eye. We try to paint a picture on radio to do that, but there's nothing like being there. What's your name?
My name is Alana.
Alana?
Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you.
My question is there something that you see the coaches of either the Blue Jays or any other teams that you've called for do to really bring their team up when things maybe aren't going well? Any tactics you see the coaches do to get their team really inspired?
So the factor of coaches and a manager?
Yeah.
Yeah, regarding all that. I do believe that there's a big factor in there. When I talk about Mike Babcock, look what he's done with his coaches too. But at the same time, you have to have players. I've always felt in the game of baseball, and I think this is true in any sport, the real competition is among the general managers and the players they bring to the manager or the head coach. Then after that, yes, you have to then have managers who manage 162 games. And the best that I've ever seen do that are Bobby Cox, who was here, Cito Gaston, and now John Gibbons. They're relaxed. They communicate with their players. They can be firm when they have to be, but they have a light sense of humor, and they let you play. One thing about Cito, pitchers, if they got into a jam, they said later, I never had to look over my shoulder into the bullpen to see if someone was warming up. Or if a hitter was due up, he never had to look over his shoulder to see if he's going to pinch hit for me. No. Cito would say, you pitch, I got your back. You hit, I got your back. John Gibbons is the same way. So they're vital. And then a manager has to surround himself with great coaches. And the best managers, and those 3 are the best at this too, you hire people who are maybe even better than you are, who communicate better, and someday might be managers themselves. And then you let them do their job. You delegate. And if any of you here are in departments here at Google or whatever, where you have people working with you or under you or however you want to phrase it, you have to too let them be them and work. And then occasionally you might have to just, like even with my own boys, I said, get out there. And then occasionally I'll rein you in if I have to, but I want you out there. I don't want to have to push you out there. And so I think managers and coaches are vital to the success of a team, but that's secondary to having players. And when Alex Anthopoulos traded for Josh Donaldson, that's exactly what we're talking about right there. He doesn't need to be motivated. He'll motivate other players around him. But for the most part, this is a great coaching staff and a manager who knows what he's doing too.
Thank you.
Let's see. Yes. What is your name?
Hello, my name's Ashley. Thanks for coming to talk to us today.
You're welcome.
I'm going to take a departure from the Jays questions and just ask about your experience in Canada and Toronto and kind of what kept you here for 35 years outside of the team.
Well, when I landed in Toronto, I really thought, being from the Bay Area, that I'd be here about 3 years and then go back to the States somewhere. But after about 3 years, I realized, one, people were very loyal to me, both with the Blue Jays and the people who hired me with the network. 2, my kids were 5 and 3 when we got here, so now they're 8 and 6. They loved where they were. I even mentioned to one of them, there's an opening in San Diego. Do you want Dad to go out there and be a San Diego broadcaster? And they said, what, and leave the snow and the ice? Are you kidding? Then I realized we had Canadian kids here. But after about 3 years, when you get comfortable in your job like that, I've always been one to, if you're comfortable where you are, stay there. I've always been happy. I'm a very happy person in the moment. Somebody asked me my philosophy of life, and I said 2 simple things. 1, enjoy the moment, like we are right here, and you're not promised tomorrow. I have a few benchmarks in my life where people, I have one sister. She had one daughter, one child. And in July of 1998, Tracy was 24. She said, I'm going to lie down. I have a little bit of a headache. Half an hour later, she was gone. She had an aneurysm. My sister's only child. I was at Santa Clara University. John Box was across the hall. from me for 4 years. He was from LA, I was from San Francisco. We each went through ROTC. I went to Frankfurt, Germany. He went to Vietnam. He was there 1 month, stepped on a landmine, was killed instantly, 22. And our broadcaster and former pitcher, you might remember the name John Cerruti. The day before the last game of the season, 12 years ago, he died in his sleep at the hotel at the Sky Dome. He had an arrhythmia situation, and his heart skipped a beat and then skipped a second one, and he was gone. So I only say these things to you because wherever you are, whatever you're doing, make that the best day that you can be and have. And don't be, again, I go back to young sportscasters. I tell them, if you're in AAA or AA and you don't get your break, okay, I got a break. I was lucky. Otherwise, I would have been, in my mind, the best Major League broadcaster who never called a game. That would have been okay. So I tell these young kids, if you're in Sacramento or you're in Colorado Springs or Birmingham, Alabama, where 3 of the ones I can think of right away, be the best broadcaster you can be in those cities. Don't look ahead. Don't think, oh, I wish I was over here, or I should be over here. No, you're missing the point. The point is this moment. And then when we all walk away from this meeting here today, make that the next best moment you can be. So Canada, to me, has been those best moments. And because I've lived half my life in one country and half in the other, you know what I've been fortunate to see? The good in both countries, the areas where we could probably improve in both countries as well. But I think up here, I just like how they treat people, young and old. And I'm always a big believer in how you treat people is the most important thing. And that's been paramount for me, too. So this is where I will finish my life right here, and I love it here. Now, I got all that because I Googled that this morning. I didn't know if you knew.
Hi,
Vera.
Jerry. Hi. I'm going to read not a question, but a comment from Tara in Waterloo. She's watching from the Waterloo office with her mom. There they are on the screen.
Tara, how you doing?
And do you want me to read it, Tara?
Sure, go for it.
Okay, so she just wanted you to know that her mom, who turned 72 on Monday, never misses a Jays game. But if the game is on the TV, she will mute the TV and turn the radio on to hear your voice. So she just wanted to say that she was watching and to thank you for being a part of their household.
Well, Tara, let me say I like you, but I love your mother. And I'm glad you enjoy the games. There was a time when my partner Tom Cheek and I were broadcasting the games on radio, and we did all 162 games. There were 3 different sets of Blue Jays television broadcasters, 3 different networks at that time. Well, they started to do surveys that up to 40% of the people, like Tara and her mom, were turning down the volume and listening to us on the radio because the satellite dishes were linked up simultaneously. Well, the TV sponsors got wind of that, and they said to TV, we don't want that. People are not listening to our commercials, and that's why we're paying good money to put these games on TV. So what television did, they spread the satellite dishes. So there was like 7 seconds between the broadcast of radio broadcast and then the TV. And sometimes up to 15 seconds. That was their way of kind of countering that. And the funny story is radio was first. So somebody would be listening and they would hear the radio broadcast, then they would watch the television. And God bless this fan, he came up to me, an older fan, and he says, Jerry, you're the best umpire that I've ever seen. And I said, what do you mean? He said, well, you call the balls and strikes before the umpires do. You're so much better than they are. And I didn't have the heart to tell him that that was because of the delay. But I do think that you can do both up to a point. But radio, for me, has always been a great sport for baseball. The television is very nice, too. And wherever you are watching or listening, enjoy those moments because they're great moments, especially when you win. So thank you very much out there in Waterloo. Appreciate it. Now let's see. Do we? Yes. Yes.
Sure. I'm Liz.
Lynn?
Liz.
Liz? Hi,
Yes.
Liz.
Hi. I have a question about your presentation skills. Like, how do you have any tips for us on how to kind of remove fillers from our voices or anything when we're giving presentations? Because obviously you're very good at it.
I think it's a matter of experience. I will say this, and it's an example I think we can all use. Alex Anthopoulos, when he became the Blue Jays general manager, he came to me with basically that same question. And he said, Jerry, do you have any advice for me? I said, well, let me hear you. He said, yes, I'm going to be interviewed now a lot over the next few weeks, I'm a new general manager. Tell me what you hear. So after about a week, I told him, Alex, I hear the Fab Five. And he's telling me, what's that? And I said, this is what I hear. You know, I mean, gonna, wanna. There's no such word as gonna. You're going to. There's no such word as wanna. You want to. I mean, that's kind of gone viral as well. And you know. I said to Alex, if you can clean up those things in your everyday conversation 24/7, you automatically will become a better speaker. You will get at the microphone and you eliminate those things when you're on the phone. Don't repeat those 5 things. Don't do it. And after about 2 weeks, when I heard him again, cleaned it up. Now, are you going to be perfect? No. But if you can go from saying those words 85 or 90% of the time down to 10%, you become a better speaker. So for all of you, when you leave the room here, start right now. You don't need a microphone in front of you. And then later, when you're making presentations, you will have already gone through presentations. You will have already spoken articulately and eloquently. Why? Because you've eliminated those 5 things. And it's just a matter of experience. One thing I like to is I like to move around. I like to have a microphone right here, and that gives me a chance to relax a little bit too. I think we're down to 3 late. Let's have a guy. Let's have a guy. Who? Yes.
Going back to public speaking, do you find that there is like a generational gap in how people talk today versus 35 years ago? Okay, so going back to presentation, public speaking skills, do you find that there's a generational gap or difference between how people speak today versus 35 years ago, and specifically with regard to slang words or filler words? Do we do it more today than people used to 40 years ago?
I would say this, and that's an interesting question. I don't think back in the day there was a better way of speaking, but I think here today it's sloppier. I think today, I mean, you know, I think all those have crept into the language, gonna, wanna. Those are just a few examples like I mentioned. And for whatever reason, I think it's taken away from the ability to speak more precisely, correctly. And if you notice right there, I paused. One thing I tell public speakers, and this gets back, Liz, to your question, pause. Another word that links sentences would be so. And you'll hear people on an interview, I'll be listening to some of these young speakers. They'll say a sentence, so, because, I mean, you know, and then they finish right here. And where did they start? They started right here. Now, if they would just answer the question, I think the Blue Jays have an excellent opportunity this year to go back to the playoffs. Boom. See the difference? It's almost like a homily. If you go to church and hear a priest speak or whatever, if he speaks for 5 minutes, you'll retain a couple thoughts that you can use the rest of the week. If he speaks for 20 minutes, you don't even remember what he said the first 5 minutes. I've always believed, keep it simple, keep it short. And as an example, when I work with Joe Siddle on the radio, my job is to do the play-by-play. I will call the play-by-play. I will call the ground ball to short, throw to second, back to first, double play. I'm done. I finish. I don't go on and on and on. Now, Joe can say, Jerry, that double play was made because Troy Tulowitzki went into the hole, great footwork, turned his body, opened up, made a great throw to Devin Travis, who was able to turn the double play. Now, it's 2 voices there speaking, one calling the play, the other the insightfulness to make it happen. But I do think today, when you listen to people speak, and now because of this awareness right here, you'll hear that. But you don't have to be that way. You can be better. And then when you have kids or you hear people around you who are trying to become more eloquent speakers, mention a few of those things to them. And I've always felt speaking starts right with your everyday conversation. Okay, what other questions do we have? Yes.
So
what's your name?
My name is Matt.
Matt? Okay,
Yep.
good. That's right, we met.
Baseball is a game that hasn't really changed a lot. Man throws ball, man hits ball. But the last decade, I guess you could describe like analytics has changed the game. So I wonder from your perspective, having a window, over a long period, watching a lot of baseball, how you think analytics have made an impact in the game.
Analytics have really, I think, become part of the front office and the approach to players and the game itself and making yourself better. I really believe that has enhanced the game. For me as a broadcaster, especially old school, Analytics don't really get into the broadcast because not every fan is fully aware of all the terms that are involved and the analytics that go into making a player better for that game, that inning, that pitch, that at-bat. I think on the pre- and post-game show, those things can be addressed and talked about. But as far as the game of baseball itself, you see shifts, you see all kinds of things, and it's a game of percentages. And the higher the percentage you can have defensively to get somebody out, use it. So I think analytics have been a definite part of the game. For me, it's more story-oriented. There are two things that I like to take pride in. One, when you hear a broadcast, is it believable? I think that's the first thing. And then I like to humanize the players and talk about a story they had in high school or where they were 3 years ago in the minor leagues. So at the end of the game, whether the Blue Jays won or not, somebody can say, I learned about that player. I didn't realize that he was a referee in high school when he played baseball. Something along those lines that make it something you retain after the game. Eric.
Jerry. Jerry, what are the...
You're sounding like me up here. Come on now.
Listening to your tips and tricks. What are the 3 or 4 storylines that you're going to be watching for in spring training with the Jays?
Number one, the health of the starting pitchers. There are 5 of them, and they're all pretty good. And Joe Biagini would be the 6th, but he'll be in the bullpen to start the year. That's not a lot of depth. So hopefully those pitchers who are excellent will stay healthy. They did this last year, but sometimes that's an anomaly in and of itself. After that, the health, too, of Troy Tulowitzki at shortstop, getting older every year, Donaldson. The health of Devin Travis at second base. He's such a good young player, but he's only averaged about 70 games every year for the last couple of years. So injuries are a big factor. How are they going to do? How are they going to handle themselves health-wise? Number 2, the backup catcher to Russ Martin, because Russ wore down a little bit, too, and I think they have to have a catcher to kind of help him in that situation. And then after that, who's going to play at first base? Steve Pearce, Justin Smoke. Will Jose Bautista play a little bit in there? Jose will be in the outfield. Father Time caught him a little bit last year, but he also had 2 freak injuries, and that takes time to heal. The older you get, the more the freakish the injuries are, and the more time it takes to heal. I look at those particular areas right there. But overall, in spring training, play. Get yourself ready for the regular season, and then after that, it's a matter of trying to stay healthy because they have enough nucleus of players to make it happen.
And just as a follow-up, almost every spring there's sort of one player who catches people off guard, wasn't expected to make the team, and then sort of makes a run for it. You think Castro or Osuna a few years ago. Is there a player this year who you think could be on that list?
The way to answer that is nobody knew who those players were when spring training started. So I don't know. But I do know one spring training at 86, this submarining, sidewinding pitcher, Mark Eichhorn, came out of the bullpen, got everybody out and made the team, and was the Sporting News Rookie Pitcher of the Year. Then another time, this kid from the complex, the Bobby Maddox Center, he comes over to play center field in a game. He's a backup player. He makes 2 dazzling running catches at the wall. Reed Johnson came out of nowhere and became an everyday major league player. What I'm hoping along those lines, and he's from Mississauga, is that Dalton Pompey will now rise to the next level and help the outfield considerably because he's such a considerably talented young man. Yes, in the back there.
Who is your favorite current player for the Jays, and also your favorite player overall in the history of the Jays?
My overall favorite player of all time is Tom Henke. Tom was here, of course, in 85 through 92. But what I loved about Tom was the person that he is and still is to this day. Genuine, modest, unassuming, family. He's from a little town called Taos, Missouri, 780 people. He was a bricklayer and went on to star in the major leagues. Now this tells you about Tom Henke too. His last year with the Cardinals, he saved 36 out of 38 games for the Cardinals under manager Tony La Russa. And he said, I'm going to retire. I want to be with my wife and 4 children. Tony La Russa in the offseason begged him to stay. You saved 36 out of 38 games. He said, no, I'm finished. I want to be with my family. He's number 1. Current player today, I've got to go with Josh Donaldson. He's fun, but between the lines, he's all business, but he's got a great sense of humor, applies himself, plays hurt, plays the game the way it's supposed to be played, and he's not afraid to get in front of a teammate's face either and say, you're not playing. Play harder. We can't play and win without you. So those would be my 2 favorites right there. Yes?
So you spoke about the lot. You spoke about the last 2 years as being your favorite with the passion and everything, but a lot of sort of new mess has come with that as well. If you think of Game 5 against Texas, the wild card against Baltimore, where we had fans throwing beers and just things you're not used to in Toronto ever seeing. I just wonder how those made you feel when you saw it and just the overall impact on the team. And the second part is your funniest Blue Jays story with Gibbons or Josh, whoever it is.
Well, when you see something where the fans do something like that, all you can do is just hope that they don't do it again, or maybe there's a stiffer penalty or fine or whatever to make sure that it's not repeated. Fans are fans. That's what they call them, fans. They're short for fanatics, and you throw things out on the field, those things happen. That's what really made Bautista's bat flip home run memorable. It's not the bat flip. It was what happened preceding that. And the Russ Martin incident, and Reggie Odor, and the ball off the bat, and he's scoring the tying run. So when those things happen, I just have to step back and explain to the fans, this is what happened. Don't let it happen again. Try to, come with some reserve too, but that's easier said than done. Funny moments, I don't know if I right now could think of any funny moments, but there are all kinds of areas where in the game of baseball, like Roy Campanella once said, you have to have a lot of little kid in you to play this game. So there are moments that later in the clubhouse, especially if you win, what were you thinking when you did that? Or how much fun was that for all of us to watch? I'll give you an example. Years ago, Lloyd Mosby was an outfielder for the Blue Jays. Great guy. One of my favorites, to get back to your question right there. So Lloyd's at first base, and he takes off for second to steal second. Slides in, beats the throw. The throw goes into center field. Well, Lloyd didn't follow the flight of the ball. Next thing he knows, he looks up from his slide, and the center fielder, Kenny Williams, has the ball in his glove. Mosby thought, uh-oh, that was a fly ball. I got to get back to first base. So he sprints back to first base. Kenny Williams throws it back to first base. Lloyd slides in, safe. The ball gets by the first baseman. Rolls to the dugout. Lloyd gets up again, sprints towards second base. The catcher backs up, throws it to second base, the slide, he's safe. And in the dugout, Willie Upshaw, George Bell, they're laughing so hard they're on the ground. And he didn't even get a stolen base. It was scored a fielder's choice and an error on the center fielder. So those are the things that are funny, and they're really funnier in the clubhouse when everybody says, what were you thinking? Now, another funny thing, just quickly, and take another question or two. When the Blue Jays on September 14th of 1987 hit 10 home runs, Major League record. 8 was the record. Rob Ducey, a rookie, hit his first home run. That was number 8. Ernie Witt hits the record-breaking home run, number 9. So they take him out of the game. He's in the shower, and he's thinking, Ernie Witt, I can't wait to read about myself. 9 home runs, set the Major League record. Somebody came in and said, Ernie, wipe that smile off your face. Fred McGriff just hit a home run. He's the record holder. We got 10 now. So things like that are kind of funny. Yes. Vern?
Wondering what you can share about the Blue Jays culture, both in the clubhouse and from a management perspective. And the reason I ask is...
Wait, say that again?
What you can share about the culture within
culture?
The clubhouse and from a management perspective. I think as a Toronto sports fan, we've seen what Masai Ujiri's done with the Raptors, fostered a specific culture, and I think we're seeing that with the Leafs now with Shanaplan and Babcock being there. What are we seeing with the Jays, if at all? Like, there's rumors about Jose and if he's good or bad, all that. What can you share about the culture?
How do you define culture?
I guess how the guys are with one another. Is there a respect level? Is there a sense of family? I don't know what the culture is. Is there a culture? Is there an identity that everyone kind of identifies with?
Along those lines, I think most Major League clubhouses is family. You're with each other for better than 7 months. As the players say, I'm with these guys more than I am with my wife and my kids. In fact, the other day, my wife and I were talking about the fact that we've been married 45 years, really only 35, because 10 of those years I've been on the road. People ask me, how do you account for a 45-year marriage? I say 2 words, road trips. But the culture in the Blue Jays clubhouse is a good one because of people like Donaldson. Now, Donaldson's personality is way out here. Troy Tulowitzki is just as vital. His personality is over here, but you need them both. Russ Martin's right in the middle, pushing. Devin Travis, happy as can be. So the culture is a mix. Jose Bautista, very emotional. Now that can play favorably or not so favorably. The one thing I would like to see Jose do less of is continue to argue with umpires. The umpires are real too. the old umpire adage is an umpire starts from a state of perfection and then he's asked to improve. Not going to happen. So let the umpires umpire. It's almost like when I was a high school basketball coach, I told my players, and I insisted on this, you play and let them ref. I'll take care of the referees. Okay, Jose, I think, can hurt himself when he continually carps at umpires. And after a while, an umpire is going to say, with his fraternity, enough. I'm not going to take that anymore. If there's a borderline call, you're not going to get it. Those are examples, I think, of where passion is good, but can be harmful at the same time. But the Blue Jays have, under John Gibbons and the coaches, they've always had a good culture. And speaking of that word, too, one of the reasons why I love Toronto as much as I do, and I was from California, a little town there north of the Golden Gate. Suddenly, I go from a town of 30,000 people to almost 3 million. Multicultural Toronto. I love that. It's so good for our kids, for all of us, to be with different people from different backgrounds and cultures and religions, and that's what life is. It's not just, this is my way and this is the only way. No, forget that. Put that over here. What works for me is good, but I appreciate what works for you too, whether it's trying to get a spiritual life and however you approach that, and whatever you do to make that happen. But if my approach is different than yours, we both have good approaches, especially if we're both good people trying to make something happen, because a spiritual life takes us away from not just being me, but other-directed and seeing people as they are, as people. Whether you're an umpire or just somebody who's working for Google, it doesn't matter. I love multicultural Toronto, and I wish everybody had that kind of experience. Vera.
I'm going to do another question from the Dory. This is from Cash. He's sent in this question from Sunnyvale in California. Hi, Jerry. Thank you for coming and talking to us. Can you share any anecdotes about the signals the players and coaches use to communicate on the field?
Now, he's from Sunnyvale?
We have an alias that all Canadians around the world subscribe to, so I suspect he heard about this talk through there, but he sits in Sunnyvale.
Okay, that's right where I grew up and where Troy Tulowitzki's from. So repeat that question one more time.
Sure. Can you share any anecdotes about the signals the players and coaches use to communicate on the field?
That means bunt and we're done. Okay, that's... No, actually, that's an area where... I remember when I first started, I put 5 years into the Pacific Coast League. I enjoyed my time in AAA baseball. And I started to ask coaches on the side, just privately, go over the signs for me, okay? And they would. And they would go through 1,000 different signs, of which one meant something, and just before that is the indicator. So you have, let's say that that's the hit and run, but this is the indicator. I can go all through all kinds of signs right here, and eventually go like this. That's not the hit and run. But if I go this, and go here, now that's the hit and run. Well, after a while, it got so complicated that I thought, the players should know those. I don't have to know them. I'm going to go in a different direction. And that's what I did. But the signs, if you don't do that every time as a third base coach, and we've been blessed with great coaches here at third base, Brian Butterfield, one of my best friends, and now Luis Rivera. Every time that there's a sign put on, you might camouflage that 1,000 times during the game to make 3 of those signs mean something. And a player better be heads up to know what the indicator is and what the sign is. Sometimes the other team has very good coaches, then they steal those signs. So what will happen is a manager might say, when we go into this game, you're going to see Luis Rivera give all those signs. But you see our trainer right here, Tommy Craig or George Poulos, whoever it happened to be, when he goes like this, that's the sign. That's what you're looking for. The sign comes from the trainer. There's all kinds of ways to try to deceive, but if you start calling pitch outs or whatever and they're not going, or you sense that they've stolen your signs, then you have to start all over again. So it's an interesting situation, and then where you go from there depends on a lot of different factors, but the main thing is when you see that coach doing all those signs, something in there might mean something only 2 or 3 times, and those are the ones that count. Yes?
I play baseball Thursday nights. It's an open invite if you ever want to come call a game.
What are your signs?
We're working on them. Just a quick question about some of the different places that you've gone. Is there a ballpark that you love, and where does the Skydome rank among your favorites?
My favorite ballpark is Fenway Park. It was built in 1912, Wrigley Field 2 years later. Wrigley Field would be right there, but we hardly ever go there, although this coming season the Blue Jays do go to Wrigley Field for interleague play against the Cubs. But if if any of you, and I was talking to Eric about this too, and Vern, and if you go to a visiting ballpark from Toronto, try to go to Fenway Park. It's built right in the neighborhood right there. It's outstanding. It's close-knit. It holds about 37,000. Every game is sold out. The Red Sox are always a going concern, but that's my favorite. After that, I like Safeco Field out in Seattle with the retractable roof, but unlike the Rogers Center, which is really an indoor facility, out there in Seattle, that's an outdoor facility. The roof is always open except for one situation, when it's raining during a game. That's why they have grass and dirt. I like Angel Stadium in Camden Yards. Angel Stadium, of course, in Anaheim. Camden Yards in Baltimore. And then I like the Rogers Center, too. I particularly like it when there's 50,000 fans there each night. So that's a pretty good facility, too. Larry, Scott, you got anything? Larry. See, Larry and Scott, they're not that big at Google, so they're out in the bleachers, you know.
We're in the cheap seats,
The
Jerry.
cheap seats.
We were talking earlier, I grew up in the Windsor area. Someone mentioned falling asleep to your voice. For me, it was Ernie Harwell. Amazing announcer for the Tigers. I'm just wondering, is there a fraternity or a competition, or how do you work with other announcers, and what do you draw from them? Is there a league or a group association of announcers?
There really is a fraternity among us broadcasters, and Ernie Harwell was one of my favorites. Here I am, I'm proud of the fact that I'm 70 years old. I just finished my 35th year, going to my 36th. Ernie did a full 162 games on Tigers radio at the age of 84. 84. But Ernie was a wonderful Christian man who didn't wear his Christianity on his sleeve. It gets back to what I was talking about before. Be you. Let God take you where you're supposed to go with that. But my best story about Ernie was Ernie, my first year in spring training, 82, I'm taking down the Tigers lineup. I feel a tap on the shoulder. I turned around. Jerry, Ernie Harwell, welcome to the major leagues. Well, he didn't have to do that, but he knew about me, a first time that a broadcaster in the major leagues. The next year, he said, why don't you bring your wife, Mary, and your two boys, they were like 6 and 4, Ben and Joe, over to my place. Lulu and I have a place right here in Dunedin. So we go over that afternoon, and I'm visiting with Lulu, Ernie's wife, who's still alive, by the way. I think she's in her mid-90s. And all of a sudden, I look over, my wife is on the sofa, and Joe, our 4-year-old, he's over there crying. And Mary says, Joe, what's the matter? And he says, where's Ernie? Where's Ernie? And she said, right there. And he turned around and he went, no, Bert and Ernie. Bert and Ernie. He thought the whole day he was going to see Bert and Ernie from the Sesame Street guys. And right away, Harwell says, Miss Mary, don't worry about that. He's not the first one disappointed upon meeting Ernie Harwell. And then a little bit later, I was with my mother-in-law at a home that she was in for retired people in Kalamazoo, and had my computer, and they had the little instant messages right there. So if somebody gets online, then you can send them an instant message. So sure enough, there's BB Peach 80. Ernie was from Georgia. The Georgia Peach was Ty Cobb. BB Georgia Peach, it was BB Peach 80, and Ernie was 80 at that time. And so I called my mother-in-law in. I said, Betty, Ernie Harwell's on the line right here. So what do you want me, I'll type out a message. What do you want to say to him? She says, hi, Ernie, this is Betty. I'm Jerry's 80-year-old mother-in-law. I said, okay, now wait a minute, he'll write back. Sure enough, he writes right back. Hi, Betty, this is Ernie. I always enjoy playing with kids my own age. So there's a certain fraternity. I know all the broadcasters, and you don't do too much with them except when you're playing them in a series. And then you go into the booth before the game. How you doing? Eric Nadel, he's been broadcasting since '79. Marty Brenneman with the Reds. It's a camaraderie that you have and enjoy, and hopefully kind of like people right here, you will enjoy the camaraderie as the years go on. You might leave here or whatever, but later on you'll say, hey, thanks a lot. I remember those years at Google and what an influence you made on me, or how it turned out. Yes.
Thanks, Jerry. Fellow disheartened 49ers fan here. So.
Oh, good. Now, what's your name?
Andrew.
Andrew?
Yep. And also, I'm loving the Seattle talk here because the Mariners may or may not be my favorite team. So that's very nice. But my question was going to be, do you have anything about Dave Niehaus to enlighten us with?
Well, Dave, of course, got the job with the Mariners, like my partner Tom Cheek. I got to know Dave for years and years, and he was an iconic voice like Tom Cheek was. And when you're the first announcer in a city, that's who the people become familiar with. And no matter what your style is, eventually you become part of those people's families. You're with them every day on the radio. And Dave was just a terrific person, very enthusiastic, loved what he did, and it was fun to be around him. And it was kind of nice to see both of them go into the Hall of Fame at Cooperstown, and rightfully so.
Awesome. Thank you.
Yes, in the back. Oh, no, you got the mic. Go ahead. You're first.
My question is, what's your favorite Tom Cheek story?
Favorite Tom Cheek story. So Tom didn't do a lot of smiling, but one day he comes into the booth at nighttime and he's just beaming and smiling. And I said, Tom, what happened? Because I knew there was a golf tournament that day. And I said, Tom, you're so happy. What happened? He looked and he said, Jerry, today I got into Cito's wallet. What happened was he played Cito in golf, and on the last hole he made an 18-footer and Cito missed his putt, and Tom Cheek won $20. So that was one right there. And the other one was together we were in Seattle, and they had the Miracle Food Mart hit and win winning inning. If you hit a home run, that fan, the fan didn't win. The fan won $50,000, not the player. Junior Felix one time said, "Hey, I hit a grand slam, and I thought I got the $50,000." I said, "No, Junior, it's for the fan." So there's a grand slam earlier in the year. That's $50,000. Then there was another grand slam in the designated inning. That was not covered by insurance. Now we go to Seattle, and Lloyd Mosby hits a grand slam. That's two beyond the insured that they had for the first $50,000. And Tom and I just started laughing about that, and uncontrollable laughter. And so I remember, too, how funny that was. Not for Miracle Food Mart, but for Tom and me. Yes?
There's been a lot of historic calls in the history of baseball. We all know about the touch 'em all Joe, like that sticks out in everyone's mind. So what are the one or two historic calls that stick out in your mind over the years?
Honestly, and I just talked too about the Dave Winfield two-run double, but for me, the two most favorite calls that I've had have been the last 2 years because of the crowd. Bautista's home run, which I was fortunate enough to call in the 7th inning against Texas. And then last year, Edwin's home run to beat Baltimore in the 11th inning in the wild card game. Those are my two favorites because of the crowd. I like to make short, sweet calls, but I've always been a big believer, let the crowd come in. Don't talk over the crowd. And even if I go a minute where the crowd is just cheering beyond any expectation, those are favorite calls for me. Those are the two that come to mind. Oh, we got one more in the back. Yes.
Just a quick question. So baseball players historically are known for being like very superstitious. Do you have any funny stories or any observations you've had of players on the current team that have very interesting superstitions?
No, but I can tell you a funny superstitious story. Bobby Cox was a manager my first 4 years, 82, 3, 4, and 5. And in 85, the Blue Jays won 99 games. And right in there, they had a game where it was in the middle of the season, and the Blue Jays won 7-6. And somebody said afterwards, Bobby, you were late for the game. You're a manager. You were there for the game, but you were late. What happened? He said, I got lost. The directions, I couldn't go from my apartment to Exhibition Stadium. I got lost. It took me 20 minutes. So the next day, he shows up exactly the same time. He took exactly the same route, and they won like 7 in a row at home. And he said, I'm going to keep getting lost for 20 minutes every day instead of getting here in 5 minutes until we lose. And that's a true story. So superstition really is kind of a part of baseball. And the other funny story is Wade Boggs. He was all superstition, but he also won like 3 or 4 batting titles and maybe even more. And so he had a superstition that he'd be in the front of the visiting dugout. He'd look at the clock, and at 7:16, he would go out for his last warm-ups before the first pitch at 7:30. So they found out about this. And upstairs, they jumped the clock from 7:15 to 7:17. So they're looking at Boggs, and everybody, the players know this too. So Boggs is right there. He sees 7:15. And then when it starts to click, he goes, and then he stopped. It went to 7:17, and everybody started roaring. And then the Red Sox knew about this too, and they said, hey, Wade, they switched the clock on you, man. There's no 7:16 here tonight. And so that's how superstitions can be. Now, the other superstition Boggs had, and he was one of the great players in the game, before every game, he had chicken. Yeah. So So superstitions are part of the game. Yes.
I'm just curious if, I'm always impressed by broadcasters' ability to keep speaking, to have something relevant and insightful to say at all times, and to be able to avoid dense air. I'm curious if you've been ever rendered completely speechless by something that's happened during a game.
Well, yes, during those home runs, that's when you want to be speechless. The other factor is, when I first came up here after about 2 years, and I've always taken great pride in preparation, I'm sure everybody in here too, you prepare for what you do. You wouldn't be here if you didn't prepare. And I was so prepared and using so much prepared material that an older fan who I'd become friends with, he said, Jerry, may I just suggest that with your prepared material, instead of using it all, maybe you could use less of it and pause and let the game breathe a little bit and simplify it so that we don't just hear a steady stream of prepared material. That was a good insight. And so my prepared material is still 100% prepared. And now today, especially with an analyst on the radio like Joe Siddle, I might use only 25% or 30% of my prepared material as opposed to what used to be 80 or 85%. Then the broadcast breathes, there's a crowd noise, there's pausing. And so I think that's imperative for somebody like me who was tending to do too much in that area. And that was years ago, and it's served me well ever since. But I never get to the point where, what do I say? And if I don't, I always kid Joe. I just say, what do you think, Joe?
Hi, my name is Sam. Does your wife listen to you call the games?
She never listens to me. No, she does. I've been blessed that my wife was a big Tigers fan, grew up in Kalamazoo, Michigan. So she does listen. And one of my 2 boys lives here in Toronto, and Joe's an excellent listener. And what they'll do, too, is they'll provide good insight. Now, they enjoy the games. They enjoy Dad's broadcast. She enjoys her husband's broadcast. But occasionally, too, if something comes up, they might just say, now, you said this, and maybe you could have said it this way, or your tone of voice. Sometimes my tone of voice can get a little too firm. And we all make mistakes, and that's okay. It's okay to make mistakes. Even in my career of 35 years, you're going to kick a few every year, going to make some mistakes. And don't be afraid to make those mistakes either. It's your body of work that you want to be proud of at the end of your career, not just 1 or 2 games. It's almost like a couple days ago at Centennial College, a gal named Erin right there was talking about the Cleveland logo, which in '92 I stopped talking about the name Indians, Braves, Redskins, whatever. And she said, were you concerned about the backlash? Well, I said, no, and remember this, the backlash was maybe 5% or maybe 10% at the most, as opposed to 90% of people who said, yes, that's thoughtful. That's something that has to be addressed. These people weren't even Indians. People thought they were from India, called them Indians, but to have a red-faced Cleveland Chief Wahoo or a redskin, to me, that's offensive. And it only came from a letter after the '92 World Series, when I was guilty of all that too. It came from a member of the First Nations up north, and he wrote me a note. He says, Jerry, I heard you talk about the tomahawk chop, and I heard you talk about powwows at the mound, and all those things, he said, are so offensive to us who have very little voice here in Canada, and even less in the United States as Native Americans. The next time you think about that, would you just stop and pause and think about us here and how we have to live with that too? It was such a kind, gentle, firm letter, but it was directed in the right way. I wrote him right back. And I said, for the rest of my career, this was at the end of the '92 season, I will not use the words Indians or Braves in deference to your thoughts and feelings as someone who has lived this and you find it offensive. And that didn't come up until this year when I was on the Jeff Blair show. And before the show, he said, I'm getting some emails. Does Jerry say Indians? We haven't heard that. And he said, I haven't heard you say that for a couple of years. I said, Jeff, it's been 22 years. He said, do you mind talking about it? I said, no. And so the first 5 minutes of the show, I talked about it openly like I am right here. And then, again, it just went off the charts in the right way, the way it's supposed to be, where people talk about it. And now Major League Baseball is talking Cleveland about that logo, and can't we change it? And so, again, to get to your point, you're always going to have, especially in social media, negativity. But it's the big picture that counts. It's the body of work. And if you have 10% of people who are very vocal, well, even though the silent majority of 90% or 80% or 70%, they're out there too, and you can't be swayed by going with just this little area. Do what you think is right, and then stay the course.
Isn't your favorite team the Chicago Blackhawks?
They are my favorite team.
Doesn't that have...
Well, okay, it's a little bit different. That's a very good follow-up. Their logo is completely different than a red-faced Indian. Blackhawks was named after an Indian who was a part of the U.S. military at that particular point, helping to save other people, Chief Blackhawk, regarding what he was doing to try to save lives. So there's a fine line there, too. And there are people who say the Blackhawks, all those Indian names should be turfed and should be eliminated. So the answer is yes, I'm a lot more comfortable with that than I am with Braves, Indians, and with Redskins. Now, the other thing is, too, in those arenas, especially in Chicago, they don't make a big deal out of it. They're not using tomahawk chops, and they're not using things that are derogatory that way or whatever it happens to be. So, again, it's a fine line. And in life, nothing is 100%. And so as you find out, as you get older, too, it's percentages. So that I'm okay with. If I were the Blackhawks announcer, I might be pushed to say Chicago, like I do Cleveland and Atlanta, especially if I knew more about it. But in the history of studying Blackhawks, because of what you just talked about, then I found out that it was a lot more representative of something that was really of value rather than just someone saying, oh, I'm okay with a red-faced Indian. There's a little bit of a difference there, but still a factor. And remember, in life is gray. There's no black and white. It's gray. You're going to find that in your life, too. Everything you do, there'll be two sides to the issue. But in your case, millennials, there's so much outcry regarding a headline or something that's negative but sounds like it's so instrumental or positive. That's where you have to be careful. Stick to who you are and your beliefs or whatever. And it's not easy. Not easy today. Anybody else?
I've got one more. If that's
okay. Last question.
You mentioned Cooperstown earlier, and a lot of Canadians were really happy about Tim Raines. Would love any thoughts you have on Tim Raines, the player. There's a couple other Blue Jays who I think there's much discussion about. Clemens, do you think he should be in the Hall of Fame? Fred McGriff, should he be in the Hall of Fame? And any other Jays down the road who you think have a shot?
The Hall of Fame voting is very interesting. It's one that I think could be expanded far more than what it is. And when I saw my partner for a year, Jack Morris, not get voted in after 15 years and won more games in the 80s than anybody, he's a Hall of Famer. When I saw Bert Blyleven have to wait 14 years and he won 287 games and had over 3,000 strikeouts, I'm thinking, what are the voters thinking? Now, regarding Roger Clemens, for me, he and Barry Bonds were both Hall of Famers before they got into PEDs. They can deny it all they want. But when you're 35 years old and Father Time has caught up to you like Roger, and then you win 100 more games, come on. You have to look at reality too. And so if those two have to wait and wait and wait and maybe never get in, they did that to themselves. Barry Bonds is another example of that. They're true Hall of Famers. Fred McGriff, for me, he's right there. Maybe not first ballot, but within 10 years, yes. Tim Raines had to wait his 10th year to get in there. To me, he should have gotten in a lot sooner than that. Now, a lot of people would say, oh, but the Hall of Fame is tough to get into. Well, sometimes it can be too tough to get into. Be fair and look at the game and see who ranks where and then make your decisions after that. But Raines was, for me, a Hall of Famer well before he got to that point. Jack should be in there. Fred McGriff, I think, in time, would be a Hall of Famer. He did it cleanly. And then Frank Thomas just came out and criticized those who have, like Bonds and Clemens. Frank is in the Hall of Fame, but when you're perfectly clean, there are two people that come to mind regarding that, and then this will finish it up, regarding PEDs. Frank Thomas, who even in the George Mitchell report, he said, I'm clean, ask me whatever you want. When you're clean, you can answer any question, and then you can take on your counterparts too. I think you did it, and I think you cheated, and I think you cheated too. The other one, he was 21 years old when he said this, Mike Trout. He said, for me, if you are found guilty of using, if you're tested and you find you're positive for PEDs, you should be banned for the rest of your career. You don't say that unless you think you're going to stay clean for the rest of your career, whatever that career is. Those two, I have the ultimate respect for. Clemens and Bonds, I don't have that same respect for. So there you go. Now, let me just say I've really enjoyed coming here. It's been great to be part of Google and I have to Google too. I want to tell you one quick story here. I looked up Google, and I looked up Larry and Sergey, and then their friend, Sean, was the one who was asked to come up with kind of a search engine and go on the internet and find something. And so it was Googleplex, Googlo, Plex. So Larry looked at that and he said, okay, I like Google. Let's just simplify. Let's just go with Google. So Sean punches in what he thought was Google, Google, but it was Googlo. So he finds google.com. He goes to Larry, and Larry said, you know what? That was an accident on your part. That's not how you spell Google, but let's stay with it. I like it. Okay. That was the research that I did on Google. Now, in baseball, you'll hear me say every now and then, the pitcher is 60 feet, 6 inches away from the hitter. From the front of the rubber, the plate, from the front of the rubber to the back of home plate is 60 feet, 6 inches. Well, how do you get 60 feet, 6 inches? Well, back in the late 1800s, about 1893, the surveyor went out to measure that. And he looked at the clerical paperwork that he had, and he saw 60. Then he saw 0. Instead of seeing 0, 0, the last 0, the guy wrote quickly with a pencil, and it looked like it had a little swirl at the top. He thought it was a 6. So instead of 60, 0, 0, 60 feet, which is what they intended, from the front of the rubber to the back of home plate, he lays it out 60 feet, 6 inches. He sees on a piece of paper 6006. And that's the way baseball has always been, where a hitter is 60 feet, 6 inches away. An accident, much like Sean accidentally thought Google was spelled Google. Nice way to end. Hey, thanks for having me.
Thank you.